Welcome to Shipcover, where we squeeze the bigger picture of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for a brand new tag, this being the PoetryTube Newbie tag. Now, some of you might be asking yourself, we've already got an AuthorTube Newbie tag, we've got a BookTube Newbie tag, why do we need a PoetryTube Newbie tag? And one of the main reasons is that me, being the wily little bastard that I am, I'm constantly trying to push the narrative in a direction that I enjoy. And I find there to be very little representation of poetry here on BookTube. And BookTube would be the corner of YouTube that you would be most likely to find, one would imagine, discussion about poetry. But there is not much, and I don't enjoy that. So I'm doing everything in my power to steer a little bit more poetry onto your computer screen. And this does not have to be a tag which is done strictly by people who talk about poetry, but it can also be used to shame people into either A, making things up and looking like a jackass when they are tagged but don't read poetry, or publicly admitting that they don't read poetry, either of which can be excruciatingly damning. But let's get right into the questions. Number one, do you read and write poetry, or do you just read it? This is insinuating that to write poetry, one must read it, but one must not have to read or write poetry in order to enjoy reading it. Personally, I do read and write poetry. I find that, so poetry in my writerhood was the first art form that I really dedicated myself to. Ironically, the reason I dedicated myself to it was that I don't think I had the dedication to really pursue prose. Prose takes a different type of muscle than does poetry, but they're both, I would contend, equally as difficult. Poetry being more like a 100-meter dash runner or a power lifter versus the miles that a distance runner racks up while writing prose. But I do consider myself a poet as well as an enjoyer of the medium. Number two, who is your favorite poet? And I know that I wrote the questions, so I should not nitpick or contend with them, but I'm going to. I think that there is a difference in this question between the poet that you like the most and the poet whom you enjoy the most. But the question does not have to be answered in that fashion. The difference being, I like Emily Dickinson the most. That is, I like to read her poetry and delve into the words, delve into the word choices, delve into the meter, delve into the symbolism that is set up therein. But I really live in the poetry of Charles Bukowski. When I read Charles Bukowski on the page, I really feel myself more fully, which A, might force some of you to hit that unsubscribe button very fast, but B, I think that is the purpose of poetry, right? Well, one of the purposes of poetry. I'm not one who likes to really say that there is a purpose of one thing, but I think that part of the main purpose of poetry is to make you feel you more fully. And that's what Charles Bukowski's words do for me. Number three, what is one question you would ask your favorite poet? If I were going with Bukowski, it would be to get a beer, because I think that that would be the only thing to do with Bukowski that might not lead directly to violence. For Emily Dickinson, I really don't know. I don't know, because I'll go back to a Christopher Hitchens quote from his debate with Tony Blair, when he said, one of the ways that we live forever can be through literature. And he's talking about the idea of heaven, would I want to go to heaven and meet, I might be presumptive for Christopher Hitchens to have imagined he would end up in heaven if it existed, but would I want to go to heaven and meet Shakespeare? No. Because almost definitely, meeting Shakespeare would be a disappointment. And I think that that really is, for me, what the idea of meeting Emily Dickinson would be like. I think that the individual and the mind and the greatness that I have built up as this monumental figure of literature would almost definitely be a disappointment to meet. Versus Bukowski, who you don't go into that meeting with high expectations. Especially if you've ever seen Bukowski. If you've not, there's a lot of interviews and readings of Bukowski on YouTube that you can search and find. Weird cat. But Emily Dickinson is, in my mind, too pristine, I think. And meeting her would be dangerous for my reading of her poetry. Favorite poem? For me, number 4, favorite poem. For me, again, with this duality between Dickinson and Bukowski, if it's Emily Dickinson, my favorite poem is I Died for Beauty, which goes, I died for beauty but was scarce adjusted in the tomb, when one who died for truth was lain in an adjoining room. He questioned softly why I failed. For beauty, I replied, and I for truth, the two are one, we brethren are, he said. And so, as kinsmen, met a night, we talked between the rooms, until the moss had reached our lips, and covered up our names. But if we're talking about Bukowski, it's the Bluebird. And the Bluebird goes as such. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay in there, I'm not going to let anybody see you. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I pour whiskey on him and inhale cigarette smoke, and the whores and the bartenders and the grocery clerks never know that he's in there. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay down. Do you want to mess me up? Do you want to screw up the works? Do you want to blow my book sales in Europe? There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too clever for him. I only let him out at night sometimes, when everybody's asleep. I say, I know that you're in there, so don't be sad. Then I put him back, but he's singing a little in there. I haven't quite let him die, and we sleep together like that, with our secret pact. And it's nice enough to make a man weep, but I don't weep. Do you? And that is, in my estimation, I'm going to ruin the sound real quick. That is a great poem. That is a great poem. Number 5, 5 out of 11. What is your favorite poem to read out loud? To read aloud. I think that there is a difference between being your favorite poem and being your favorite poem to read aloud. I really enjoy The Flea by John Donne, and it's going to make me stumble. But one of the funnest things about this poem is the fact that there are 3 characters insinuated. One of them is not human, and the other is almost definitely in a disagreement with the speaker. So just the dynamics herein are fascinating. The Flea. Mark but this flea, and mark in this, how little that which thou deniest me is. Me it sucked first, and now sucks thee, and in this flea our 2 bloods mingled be. Confess it, this cannot be said, a sin or shame, or loss of maidenhead. Yet this enjoys before it woo, and pampered swells with one blood made of 2. And this, alas, is more than we would do. Oh, stay, 3 lives in 1 flea spare, where we almost, nay, more than married are. This flea is you and I, and this our marriage bed be. And marriage temple is, though parents grudge, and you we're met, and cloistered in these living walls of jet. Though use make you apt to kill me, let not this self-murder be added, and sacrilege, 3 sins in killing 3. Cruel and sudden hast thou since purpled thy nail in blood of innocence? In what could this flea guilty be, except in that drop which it sucked from thee? Yet thou triumphst, and say that thou find'st not thyself nor me the weaker now. 'Tis true. Then learn how false fears be. Just so much honor, when thou yield'st to me, will waste as this flea's death took life from thee. I think that that is just such a fun poem to read aloud, even if it's not to anyone. Because what it does is, if you are a writer, it really makes you focus on the implied characters and how voice is used. Number 6, your Mount Rushmore of poetry. Who are your top 4? For me, Dickinson, Bukowski, Shakespeare, and Wordsworth. And I'm even going to cast them for you. Dickinson is Washington, because that's where it all started for me. Emily Dickinson's what opened me up to poetry, and that it was more than just words on a page. Bukowski for me is Jefferson, a bit of a curmudgeon, a bit of a misunderstood individual, and someone who certainly... So there's the story of Jefferson, who took the Bible and removed all of the fantastical from it, just to see what would be left. It's called the Jefferson Bible. And there really wasn't much left that could be believed without having to believe in the fantastical. And that is the sort of thing that Bukowski did with literature in general. He really sort of took the piss out of the whole thing and said, I mean, you can use fancy words if you want, but I don't have to. So that's sort of where that is for me. Shakespeare is Lincoln because, I mean, quite possibly the greatest of all time. But, I mean, do you really want to read a Lincoln biography every day of the week? Sometimes it just gets old, right? And Wordsworth is Roosevelt because, you know, sort of the weird one, the oddball, the one that is questionable to be on in the top 4. 7, your favorite poetry collection. Complete editions don't count. That's why I can't use Emily Dickinson. But for me, it is certainly The Pleasures of the Damned by Charles Bukowski. Anytime I get in a rut, I can just flip this book open to any page, and there will be something on there that that really is able to spark me back into a motivated place for literature. 8, rhyming. Talk about it. Yes? No? Not anymore? I am certainly open to it. I am interested in the prospect of someone finding a way to rhyme poetry in today's world that does not feel used, that does not feel cheap, and that is unique, and that does not feel like someone writing rap lyrics or writing a song on a page. I think possibly one way to do that would be internal rhyme, would be fragmentary rhyme. I don't even think that slanted rhyme anymore can get away with it. I think that if you are rhyming syllables versus words versus endings, I think that rhyming syllables within a meter, within a set amount of rhyming syllables within a syllable scheme, I think I should say. I think that you could possibly get away with that. I would certainly be interested to see someone try it, and I would definitely support a poet who was able to make something like that feel experimental instead of lazy or mawkish. So I think that there is room for it, but it has to be done not only well, but it would have to be done uniquely. And that is, and I don't, and that might not be a fair take. Because, for example, when you read something like John Donne, when you read something like Shakespeare, I don't subtract cool points for the rhyme scheme. And I don't know that I add credibility points for the fact that love and dove have been rhymed 1,000 times, but when Shakespeare's doing it, maybe they haven't, right? So I don't know why that is. And it might just be that my opinion of poetry is crowned in by the lumbering hands of academe. But maybe not. I don't know. Barring free verse, number 9, barring free verse, what is your favorite poetic form? I have to go with haiku. I wanted to have little quips about other types of poetry in there, but I just have to go with haiku because I think that there is so little space that one's entire focus has to be lasered in to, and I hate to sound, I don't know how this sounds, but has to be focused into a specific essence more than a symbol, for example, or more than any of the tools that one normally uses in poetry. And if you can do that, and you can say more with 17 syllables than... If you can say more with 17 syllables than the 17 syllables... I don't know how to say this. I wish I had a haiku to do it for me. But I think that if you can make a haiku, like rhyming, it's very difficult to pull off nowadays. But if you can do it, congratulations. Number 10, humor in poetry. Yes or no? I say yes, but again, it has to be done well, and it almost has to be hidden. For example, in the John Donne poem, The Flea, that humor is not Chuckles humor, right? It's not poking you in the rib cage and saying, laugh with me. It's saying, laugh at me. But you have to notice why. I'm not going to give you the punchline. I'm just going to give you the setup. And the punchline has to come from you. 11, what elements do you think makes the best poems? I think, for me, I really like irony. I really like irony. And I really like a core symbol. For example, in the Bukowski poem, the bluebird, that is a core symbol that we're then spiraling out from. And the irony there is that this rough and rugged son of a bitch, you don't really picture him having a bluebird in his chest. With I Died for Beauty, the irony is that these individuals died for different things, and they're so proud of the things which they died for. But at the end of the night, the moss covers their name. Now, does that mean that they're one and the same, or does that mean that it doesn't matter what they died for? They're still dead. So there's an irony in there, and obviously the image of two people dead in the same place. So those are the things that really make a poem stand out for me and make it memorable. And the irony alone, if you can have just irony without even a core symbol, I'm going to give you enough extra credit points that I'll be thinking about the poem for a while. And I'm going to tag some people. So I tagged Amy from the Dusty Bookshelf, Mark from Words Everywhere, Silje, the Don, Steve Donahue. One has to tag Steve Donahue when creating a tag. And I think that these questions are all something that people would love to hear him answer. Monse from Monse's Manifesto. Monse has had an interesting journey with poetry this year, and I think that the entire community would benefit from hearing her thoughts thereafter. Reshmika Likes Books, Alex Black, Richardson Reads, Simon from Savage Reads. I know he doesn't watch the channel, but I'd be very interested in his answers if he were to do this tag. Dave from Wild Reads, C.T. Russell from Tome Time Tea, Carol Marie Reads, Grace Marie, Rachel Marie, Remembered Reads, Peter Clark, Jen from Ifers Inklings, and Inside Robin's World. So this is the PoetryTube newbie tag, and those are the people that I tag, and I am definitely looking forward to, if I did not tag you, but you do read poetry and you are a content creator, I would certainly be interested in watching your take on the tag as well. If you are watching this and you are not a content creator, maybe answer the questions in the comments section, because these are questions that I really am interested in. That's why I wrote the tag. But again, if you are a content creator, I did not tag you, but you would like to do the tag, feel more than free to do so, because that is the whole point of creating a PoetryTube newbie tag. is to spread the word of poetry a little bit more thoroughly on this platform. That is the tag, and I hope to see you next time here on Stripped Cover Lit.